Welcome to another broadcast of Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. And now out to your host, it's Arthur D. Schwartz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again. Nice to have you back. So today I'm going to do another edition of what I call Fortress Philosophy. And, you know, what that means is the fact that I believe in philosophy. I believe in the value, the tremendous value of philosophy, of helping to clarify thinking in personal lives. I mean, I use it in my counseling, hypnotherapy counseling, and philosophical counseling practice to clarify the conscious beliefs we have as it mixes with our subconscious, culturally induced, and other, opinions we have that we don't know we have, actually. And so, the way I've gotten to this right now today is because, as you probably know, I'm completely obsessed about this election cycle. And so, the last Fortress Philosophy edition, which came out when did we do that one? Just a few months ago, actually. And that was all about Trump and demagoguery. And this one, I will touch that, but I want to go into other areas. There's one thing about Trump that I would say is valuable. I think he has created a service to the nation in the sense that it has to do with dialectic. It has to do with reverse consequences. I never thought in my life I'd see a true blue demagogue as a major candidate for president of the United States. And this guy is a demagogue, and it is, for me, and I think for others as well, an education process. It really is. My hope is, while Trump has stirred up the white supremacist section and the racist sectors of the economy, and all the I agree with Hillary as she when she says the basket of deplorables, and she reduced it from 50 to 40. I read somewhere, no, actually she should have upped it from 50 to 60 because yes, as she said, there's many people who are suffering. And I was just listening to Chris Bromwich. He had a great show, and he did talk about he thinks maybe the Democrats don't quite get the areas of the Rust Belt, the Midwest, and a lot of people are unemployed in other parts of the country. And yeah, I mean, I think that has merit. I think they do understand that, but. And those people are just people who are, they've lost jobs. Their lives are not the way it was maybe 20 years ago. So that's a real issue, no doubt, and a vital one. But the thing is, in the mix, he brought in all these deplorables. I mean, racists and misogynists. And haters of all types. So then basically he's brought up all the hatred, and so it comes from many different sectors. Some of these people are just real bad, some of these people are just suffering. Well, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, because I think demagoguery is such an important thing, and I think it's really been, for me, an education. And it blends right into my interest in philosophy because demagoguery is really, I guess, a parallel set of principles to philosophy in terms of the opposite. If we never experienced cold, we wouldn't know what hot is. So we need to, just the way the brain works, that's the way the mind works. You need to have opposites to understand what it is we're talking about as a point of distinction. So good and bad is the same way. If we lived in a world of heavenly quality, then no one was bad and no one was evil and no one was hurtful and everyone was kind to each other, we wouldn't have a conception of bad. And so in terms of what democracy is really like, what using, extolling the virtues of reason and clear thinking, that it's done by no doubt. There's no, of course, there's no guarantee that anyone is right or any party is right or any position is right. We're fallible and we make mistakes. But the idea is to set upon a course where we have an open mind to looking to the opinions of others, basic principles of fairness and justice, compassion, a true effort to try to do what is right rather than just aggrandize yourself. So that has been really a lesson of this campaign, because I really do believe this guy is a true demagogue, and the only thing saving us, I believe, is the faith I have in this country that he won't get elected. However, that is by no reason a sure thing. The election is still in question for sure. And so I think I'm going to just go down a few of these points, and then I'm going to move on, and then I'm going to come back. I mean, I'm so caught up in this election cycle, so in my own mind, I'm kind of everything gets back to that. Thankfully, the election will be over in just a few weeks. Actually, I have a show scheduled for the day after the election I was looking at, so that will probably be interesting. But the thing about demagoguery, and I've talked about this in the other show, by the way, the first show on Fortress Philosophy, called Fortress Philosophy versus Demagoguery, that was August 17th. So just a couple months ago, or even less than that. And so, but here's some of the principles. And since that time, I've been studying this more. So I actually truly believe, and this is, I'm not just saying this, I think that Trump has actually studied Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist. And he was known, I think he's even admitted that he had a book of Hitler's speeches on his bedside. I'm not saying that Trump is that evil. I mean, I've always said I don't really know. The thing is, but he's using the same techniques. So Goebbels said, accuse the other side of that which you are guilty. That's what Goebbels, accuse the other side of that which you are guilty. And Trump has done this over and over again. You see it in the debate. He called Hillary a bigot after he was being accused of bigotry, rightly so, because there's lots of evidence, accusing a judge, for example, of being unable to do his duties because he's a Mexican, and, trying to ban all Muslims from the country from coming in, and yada, yada. Being litigated against earlier in his career for bias against black folks in his buildings. And, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on again. So it's lots of. So when he was accused of the bigot, there's reason to say so. Hillary Clinton, actually, as everyone knows, has been an activist for equality in the black community and for women. So that just came from nowhere. But the thing is, according to Goebbels, accuse the other side of that which you are guilty yourself. And so that's the technique. When your opponent starts accusing you, you just accuse them back and say, no, you are. Now, there was a great article written on an online article. It was dated August 28th. And it was by the author's name is Cody Kane. And it's called The Art of the Reverse Attack. And so I might even read it because it's very, very short, but I thought it's a great, on my Twitter account, I refer to it many times. Just type in the art of the reverse attack and it'll come right up. It's on CNN.com. Let me see if I can read it. It's really great. And it's really, I read this before I became aware of Goebbels. or Goebbels, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. I always say Goebbels, statement about accusing the other side of that which you are guilty. But then when I saw this, and I came to realize that he was, looking at this campaign. But this is a very well-known demagogic principle. So here's the article. Hillary Clinton is a bigot under Trump. Huh? Hillary Clinton, a bigot? That makes no sense. It's absurd. Hillary Clinton has spent much of her career working to improve race relations. She is the furthest thing imaginable from a bigot. So what in the world is Trump doing here? Trump is employing the technique of the reverse attack. When he is faced with a legitimate criticism of himself, he attempts to deflect away the criticism by attacking Clinton for the exact same shortcomings that plagues Trump, regardless of whether it actually applies to Clinton. Once again, this article is written by Cody Kane on CNN.com. Trump faced serious and legitimate criticism for his own appalling racism, so he responded by making the false accusation that Clinton is a racist. Trump uses the reverse attack all the time. He did it on the issue of his lack of qualification to be president. This is a legitimate problem facing Trump because he has no experience whatsoever in government or politics. So how did he respond to this criticism? He attacked Clinton by alleging that she is not qualified to be president. This, of course, is absurd. Clinton is perhaps the most qualified person to be president in history. I'm a Clinton fan, but I don't know if that's true. But anyway, it's said often. Anyway, she served as Secretary of State, a United States Senator, and she lived in the White House for 8 years as First Lady. Trump also pulled the reverse attack on the issue of being mentally unfit to be president. Questions about temperament are a legitimate criticism of Trump due to his outrageous behavior and statements. So, how did Trump address this criticism? He tried to turn the tables by alleging Clinton is mentally unfit. To be sure, Clinton has many shortcomings, but being mentally unstable is not one of them. Yet that does not matter to Trump. Trump has accused Clinton of being a bully, when obviously it is Trump who is a bully. The examples go on, and so does it work. Okay, I just lost my screen for a second. Okay, so does it work? Is the reverse attack effective? Well, it certainly is not the best way to overcome criticism. An ideal response would be to clearly show that the criticism is inaccurate, say by listing specific qualifications to be president. But when there are no good responses to a criticism, the reverse attack comes into play. The objective is to create confusion, and that's the whole demagogic trick, create confusion. The bigger the mess, the better. This way, the focus of attention shifts away from the devastating criticism because everyone becomes caught up in the food fight. I love that phrase that Kane is making here. This is Trump's playbook. He is the circus ringmaster who creates all sorts of spectacles to divert attention away from his own disqualifying inadequacies. While the reverse attack is devious indeed, it ultimately falls short. Once the technique is understood, the reverse attack is easy to identify, and the truth becomes clear. After all, the reverse attack is rooted in lies because the target of the attack simply does not possess the same flaws that plague the attacker. It is a flat-out lie to say that Clinton is a bigot. Let me see if there's much more to read. Oh, no, it's just one couple paragraphs, short paragraphs. Trump's attacks create a spectacle, but after a while, all the fighting becomes tedious, and we recognize its futility. After we sober up, we see very clearly that Trump is not offering any solutions whatsoever. He has no policies. He has no good ideas. He has no strategy. Shockingly, Trump's circus act has carried him to the top of the Republican ticket for president. The polls indicate that Trump is running behind Clinton. This was written, don't forget, a while back, but within striking distance. So from this perspective, Trump is underhanded. Trump's underhanded reverse attacks may work. The question is whether the voters will begin to see through Trump's circus act before it is too late. And I just love this article. Once again, give the man credit. I want to give the man his credit. Make sure you know his name. Cody Kane. I think he writes a lot of articles online. I think for Huffington Post. This particular article is on CNN.com. His name is Cody Kane. Now, since I read that article, I realized that this is a well-known trick of demagoguery. More recently, I saw something called puffing, which is basically like a used car salesman when, and they lie. You can go to a car dealer and the dealer will say, this is like the best automobile in the world, and you can't go wrong. And they know it's all puffery, and no one really claims, that no one really gets too upset about it because they accept that. The only problem would be if you buy the car and then it falls apart way after you take it home, then you would have a problem and you won't be very happy. But we let them get away with it, and the article, this article again is online. It's the one I'm referring to, and I'm not going to read it, but it's called, it was by Jake Novak, and it's on, that one is on which, was that on CNN as well? I think I might have made a mistake. Actually, I have it right here. I want to reference it properly. Here it is. That's on CNBC. That one's on CNBC, and the title of the article is Why Trump Gets Away with Huge Lies and Clinton Gets Trashed for Little Bits. That's CNBC. And so the thing is, Trump is basically a salesman. So he gets away with all this puffery, all these, and then he's not called on it because somehow people understand that he's just a BS artist. Nonetheless, that still factors into the demagoguery. It creates confusion. It creates false acceptance, and it just is what I would say 180-degree opposite of what I call fortress philosophy. I'm just going to read down a few another one I came across, online, is something more recently, was paralypsis. It's an old principle from, the science of rhetoric, going back to the ancient Greeks. And, that example came up during the last debate when at the end of the debate, Trump said, I'm being very nice. I was going to say something really, really embarrassing, but it wouldn't be nice, so I'm not going to say it. And then, of course, after he said that, he went on talking, inferring stuff about, Bill Clinton's affairs. And since that happened, of course, now he's talking a lot about it, and he was giving the impression it will be covered on the debate we're going to have on Sunday. However, I'm not sure now because so much stuff has come down since then that I'm sure it will be mentioned. So that's another one. By the way, this on the paralypsis, Trump is not very skillful. There's a way to do it where you're not really totally cognizant of the fact that you're doing exactly what you said you're not going to do. In the case of Trump, it was just blatant, and so it was ridiculous. You say, no, I don't want to tell you this, but by the way, let me tell you. Of course, name-calling, lying, fear-mongering, scapegoating, intimidation, attacking the media. Those principles, which is I covered that in the last Fortress Philosophy talk last August, and I want to give you the article, and that was on Wikipedia, and it's the article just called Demagogue, Demagogue, Demagogue. On Wikipedia, a great article. It gives you those principles and also some of the great demagogues of history. But the principle of the reverse attack, puffing, and paralypsis I've come across all those just in the course of this campaign. So anyway, I'm going to move away from the campaign, but I want to pick up where I started from, which is the fact that for me, this has been the most educational political campaign I've experienced in my life. Because I've never seen anyone like Trump, in American politics. And he's a dangerous man. He butchers the language. He by intention tries to confuse. He's somebody who has no core beliefs. I could say he doesn't have a soul. But what I mean by that, he has no core beliefs except for the fact that it's all about aggrandizement. And, of course, the author of The Art of the Deal, who's been interviewed, I'm forgetting, I know his last name is the same as mine. I'm forgetting his first name. And he talks about that. I mean, the guy just has no inner center. And so that's the perfect human being to become a demagogue. If you don't really have any core beliefs, you just say whatever is ever efficient, effective for you to get your ends. And so Trump demonstrates that has demonstrated so often because you can see how many times he just flip-flops. And that of course makes the art of the reverse attack possible. Because, of course, the art of the reverse attack is just a lie. No, you're the bigot. No, you're the one who has bad temperament. I mean, it's just on and on and on. And I really am very proud of the news media, particularly the printed press, printed media, because they really have called him out. And I have more respect for the American press than I ever had, even though I realize it is a monopoly. So I realize that, but they have called this guy out. So kudos to the printed press, particularly the printed press, the daily press, and as well as the media, the Atlantic Monthly and other magazines as well. So I mentioned the word dialectic. Dialectic is an old principle from Greek philosophy that was, basically created by Socrates, and that's a kind of a fictitious logic where you're using definitions to force a conclusion. It has to do with oppositional. Anyone who's read some of Plato's dialogues, see this oppositional banter, and basically what Plato is doing is eventually you come down to certain definitions that are essentially proven before it's been subjected to the dialectic because it's definitionally correct, which doesn't really mean a lot many times. Lawyers study dialectic in law school because as a way of arguing. However, through the history of philosophy, the meaning has changed quite a bit. So the next big change was with Hegel. And Hegel, if any of you ever studied him, he talked. He actually only said this a few times, but it's been quoted many times. You have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So the idea you have two opposite events, not ideas, concepts. Well, yes, he would say concepts, but these are concepts in the nature of history. So you have an historical event, and then you have a reaction to that, and then you have another reaction, that's synthesis. And then, of course, Marx picked up on that and used a dialectic to argue in favor of his the dialectic of materialism, a dialectical materialism, to argue for communism. And so, like Socrates, all these forms of dialectic are basically fraudulent because they depend upon definitional argumentation, and a definition is not necessarily the truth. It's just a human concept that's created and it's defined, and the definition does not always, obviously, at least in retrospect, talking in the 21st century, does not always refer to reality. It's just the definition. However, my view of dialectic, and in my book, Ethical Empowerment, I call it the moral dialectic. It's different. What I see, first of all, the dialectic, in my view, is not something that has to be certain, which is classical. What classical dialectic is. What my view is, it's very consensual, and it has to do with the movement of reasoning in terms of consensus, as well as in terms of other forms of reasoning, which I'm going to get into. But what I want to do now is just refresh my memory here. And we're going to take a break right now. And when I come back, we're going to talk about dialectic, and I'm going to actually use that to come back to the political season and see how it all applies. So we'll be back shortly.
In Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, Arthur D. Schwartz presents an ethical theory that is a framework for evaluating moral conundrums that go beyond legalistic rulemaking, dogmatism, and preconditioned thinking. The book is as much an ethical framework for unconventional ideas as it is for staying with convention. Ethical Empowerment is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. Ultimately, the hypnotic thinking of ideology and dogmatism can only be overcome by returning to the true source and essence of morality, which is nothing less than universal love. Discover how the philosophically liberating approach of the ethical empowerment can be applied to the range of ethical, social, and political controversy. Read about a plan to eliminate all political parties. Entertain the possibility of an overhaul of the patent system and its replacement with a system that rewards inventors while eliminating monopolistic control of patents and technological suppression. Many other transformative ideas are discussed in the book, including issues related to the monetary system, real estate, scientific paradigms, and a rational approach to conspiracy theory. While ethical empowerment will challenge your mind to consider new perspectives, the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of perspective within the boundaries of love. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and e-book editions.
This is Arthur D. Schwartz. Beliefs and disbeliefs can be very powerful. Much like philosophy, hypnotism is concerned with belief. Hypnotherapy, a practical application of hypnotism, may largely be described as the practice of removing false beliefs that form mental blocks to success, to happiness, and to well-being. In my hypnotherapy and philosophical counseling practice, I combine my work in philosophy with hypnotism in order to clear mental blockages that can occur on both conscious and subconscious levels. A mental block may be conscious or subconscious and can be expressed, for example, in the form of anxiety, low self-esteem or low motivation, bad habits, tobacco habits, weight gain, low performance, and much more. If you are interested in using hypnosis and the power of the mind to overcome mental blocks and barriers that have emerged in your life, please feel free to give me a call at 617-964-4800 or visit www.integralhypnosis.com. That's INTEGRAL hypnosis.com.
This is George Thorogood of the Destroyers, and you're listening to ArtistFirst Radio.
You are listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Let's get back to your host. It's Mr. Arthur D. Schwartz.
Why, hello. So I'm back. So I took a break. When we break when the break happened, I was talking about dialectic, and I very quickly went through the history in a very brief way. Through Platonic or Socrates and Plato's dialectic, and then Hegel, and then I talked about my view of it, which is not definitionally based. So the theory I developed in my book, Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, is a oppositional force between self-regarding and other-regarding intentions. And so it breaks down to self-regarding would be, it's the morality is based on fairness, beneficence, and compassion. So it's self-regarding fairness, other-regarding fairness, self-regarding beneficence, other-regarding beneficence, self-regarding compassion, other-regarding compassion. So the principle of fairness, beneficence, and compassion, and then they're targeted either just for the betterment of self or the betterment for others. Now, of course, how does that crazy mix kind of balance itself out? And so it's not something that you can define. These are general concepts, but if we from an ethical standpoint, if we consciously try to see what the fairness means for myself or for others, or beneficence, which means good deeds, doing good in the world for yourself or for others, compassion, which generally is thought of as being compassion for others, but you need to be compassionate for yourself as well. And so you take this kind of flux, I call it, in what I would call the moral forces, which is really, this is sort of the anatomy of what I feel is universal love, but this is sort of the anatomy that makes it up, that constitutes it, I should say. And then you subject it to other people's opinions. You have consensus. You have a consensual flow. And so it's not like you're just having these definitions like you're cranking out like a mathematical equation. It's an effort to understand what love means, what loving intention and the intentionality and sexuality, meaning the intention and how it all plays out, what the effects are, the consequences are, and then you come to opinions, and they're not definite, they're not absolute, and they could be wrong. But with our best effort, that's what it means. You kind of play these forces out, and then we form consensus. Now, I was listening to the radio. I don't want to. Anyway, I don't want to go there. There is a flow of history. There's no denying that. History changes. Now, what constitutes that? Is this free will come into play? Does dialectic come into play? How about cause and effect? How about just the way the world is, the cause and effect of history? That certainly comes into effect. So you see, many people say, well, it doesn't really matter who gets elected president. And to a certain, in a certain sense, I think that's absolutely true, because the underlying forces of history are marshaling forward. But here's the thing: is that all there is? Is it just one deterministic event? Is it already a sealed fate that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is going to become the next president? Or is it truly up in the air? So we get to the old argument of free will and determinism. And a lot of scientists today think, there's no such thing as free will, that ultimately everything is determined. I mean, when I say that, when I say scientists today, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I understand, most neuroscientists think there's nothing that actually is that is actually totally free. Determined. I'm not sure if that means the same thing as a fate, a defined event, a defined, an outcome that is certain. Anyway, my view is that's not true. There is an element of free will, but then again, there is also a lot of determinism. I call it relative freedom because there is relative freedom and there's relative determinism. Some things are determined, some things are free. But here's the thing. If there is a hair of freedom, one hair of freedom, then there cannot be determinism. Because that one hair of freedom is the wild card. And I would also say there's no absolute determinism, because if there's, or rather I should say there's no absolute freedom. Because if some things are determined, then we're not absolutely free. So we're relatively free and we're relatively determined. And that's the way I look at this campaign and this election. Now, I call this, what I'm to talk about now, I don't use the word determinism, I don't believe it. I call it convergence. And in my book, I have a chapter called Convergence, Power, and Correction. I'm certainly not going to read this chapter. It's a long one, actually. But this is what I say about convergence. I sort of make an equation, as it were. Convergence equal causality plus dialectic plus free will. And I say the sailing of, okay, let me just read this little passage. History carries us ahead, and we can know, well, let me just back up. Let me read this little paragraph. The relationship of freedom to convergence is like that of a sailing ship to the currents of the air and the sea. The ship will likely get to its destination, but it can only ignore the force of the currents at great peril. The ship's captain can navigate, but he cannot fight the currents. He must use the sails and rudder to work with the currents, and while wind and water currents or weather conditions may force the journey far off its preferred course, the ship will most likely reach its destination safely. History carries us ahead, and we can no more escape its power than sailing ships or than sailing vessels can escape the power of the sea. Convergence equals causality plus dialectic plus free will. The sailing vessel's journey is a metaphor for convergence. And so, yes, we have these currents in our history, and that is real, and that's cause and effect, and that is determined. But we also have something called dialectic, which is not this definitionally true process that I was referring to before, such as the ancient Greeks used. But it's just the use of our reason and the consensus that among us, once we submit to the idea that we're trying to work with loving intention, where our intentions are good, And we try to be pure there if we can, to the extent possible. We try to do it in such a way that the effects would be good, the effectuality would be good, but it's not certain. But that does push history in a certain way. It's not absolute, but if you submit to the guidance of love and you try to work things out in terms of fairness, beneficence, and compassion with respect to self and other in each case, try to navigate those forces, then being influenced by cause and effect, by the truly determined effects like the ocean. Actions have reactions. Events cause reactions. Some of them are absolute. It has nothing to do with human intervention. But that's modified somewhat by dialectic and further modified somewhat by free will. So there is determinism in the world, and history is moving in a certain direction. But we still have some say about it. That's why everybody do vote, despite what I said one time. I mean, if you're not paying attention and you're just voting because you like somebody, like the way somebody looks, or you flip a coin, no, don't vote in that case, please. But if you're following the election and you have strong opinions and you open your mind to making a fair judgment that's not motivated by hate, because if you're a hater, then don't vote. But I'm being selfish, or not. Anyway, yes, if you follow this election and you have opinions, you should vote. If you don't have opinions and you just really don't care, then don't vote. Really, don't spread your ignorance around. But if you take your vote seriously and you have opinions and you've listened to the debates and you've read the newspapers and so forth, and you follow it the best you can, watch the news, you should vote. And so therefore, it's free, but it's not. It's not, but it is. That's the mystery of it. There's no absolutes, but there is a hairbreadth of freedom. The example I like to give is, let's say you're setting off. So I'm in the Boston area. So let's say you're setting off from Boston, and you want to go to L.A. And then you make a teeny-weeny little wrong turn, but you're not aware of it. This is just an example. I think I might have already said this on the air. Anyway, maybe I'm repeating. Anyways, it's okay. And so you keep on going, and suddenly, we're almost getting to L.A. And then the sign appears, and it says, "Welcome to Mexico." Okay, a dumb example, right? But the point is, a little change can make a big difference. And so sometimes a little change in a current event, in something that happens in your life, someone you happen to meet, something that's said that you happen to have heard, can change your life, or can change an election, or can change history. Now, someone argue, well, you're looking at individual cases. You have to average the whole thing out. After all, there are how many billion people in the world today? I don't know what it is. Is it 6 billion or is it 10 billion? I don't know. I forget. I think it's maybe. Do you know what it is, Scott? How many billion people in the world today?
It's between 6 and 7 billion.
Yeah, 6 and 7. I'm old enough to remember. I think it was 3. The population is really exponentially growing. And they would say, well, it all averages out. Well, I don't think so. Well, yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But still, in my view, is the human race going to make it? I don't know. And I don't think it's determined. And that actually goes into another issue that has to do with time travel. because I think, we may be able to go back in time, or I believe maybe not interact with time, but observe from an observer standpoint, in my view. But going into the future, for the very reasons I'm just describing, I say you really can't, in a way, because the future is indeterminate. If everything is determined, then you clearly can go into the future. I mean, if time travel is possible, I should say, then you can clearly go into the future because it's determined, right? But if I'm right and it's not determined, because there is some element of free will that has an effect on individual lives and on our collective existence, then the best we would be able to do is to go forward into time and to visit possible futures, because there are a realm of possible futures. So so I just figured I'd throw that in there. I could start talking about time travel, but I know Scott said I had a little bit more time today, but I don't think I've got that much more time. And I just realized as I'm talking, that's a double entendre, isn't it? Get that more time, less time, and time travel. Okay. Well, the thing about words are kind of cool, because the words are really a good handle on dialectic. Because words just spring all these different possibilities out, the different meanings, the different way words are used that overlap in different situations, or can be forced into a situation like I just did. And then it it helps us to think in multi-dimensional and in multiple lines of thought. So anyway, I'm going to take another break now. I'm going to close out that show. We'll do one more segment, and I'll move forward. See you soon.
Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many topics discussed in Ethical Empowerment, in the section entitled Tales of the Pot and the Kettle, concerns the shouting matches between mainstream science and unconventional technologies that the mainstream loves to deride as pseudoscience. Some claimed inventions may well be hoaxes, but there is very good reason to believe that many others have been suppressed in order to retain monopoly control or for other unsavory reasons. Is free energy possible? Are cures for cancer being held back or impeded by big pharma and the medical establishment? To what extent may ego, money, and power stand in the way of revolutionary breakthroughs? Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many transformative ideas discussed in Ethical Empowerment is a new type of patent system that would dramatically expedite the development of inventions by fairly rewarding inventors while at the same time eliminating monopolistic control of patents and threats of technological suppression. This proposal for a new patent system would unleash a new era of technology that has hitherto been thought impossible, and empower a new era of economic flourishing. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many transformative ideas discussed in Ethical Empowerment is the elimination of the political party and its replacement with an independent, no-party political system. By freeing society of the political party, the democratic process will encourage the emergence of creative political solutions through a natural political process. Oppositions and alliances will become unfettered by needless obstruction and entrenched divisiveness. The political party artificially divides and obstructs, and does little else. It is time for a new day in American politics, a truly independent political system that has freed itself from the institutionalized divisions of party politics. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Hello, Arnold Schwarzenegger here with an important announcement. You may remember me from movies like The Terminator, but I would like to talk about one particular movie where I go to Mars. There is this mountain called Pyramid Mountain, and all this crazy alien shit goes on inside it. Do you think that's all science fiction? Think again, my friend. That's why you have to tune in to Pyramids on Mars UFO radio show on ArtistFirst.com. My friend Kevin Estrella, he is in a band called Pyramids on Mars. He has also been contacted by aliens. This guy has been a guest on over 15 UFO radio talk shows, so you have to listen to him. There's something going on, and it can't be ignored. He interviews people who have been abducted by aliens. He interviews alien-human hybrids. This is no bullshit. So get to the chopper! Do whatever you have to do and go listen. Get your ass to Mars. Pyramids on Mars. UFO Radio.
You are listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Now back to your host, Arthur D. Schwartz.
Well, I'm glad to see that Arnold has joined us.
Wasn't he the governor of California?
Yes, he was. Okay. Well, so I just would, since we were talking about time travel and that Mars movie is Mars. What is that?
I think it was Total Recall, wasn't it?
Yeah, but so the ad was for what now?
Oh, the show is called Pyramids on Mars with host Kevin Estrella. It's on first Tuesdays at 11 Eastern.
I got to check it out. Did he talk about the Pyramids on Mars stuff? With
yeah, they had an alien hybrid, reptilian hybrid on last night, and he's had 3 shows with abductees.
I see. Oh,
it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, check it out. It's
Sounds
not.
good.
It's not
maybe,
what you
maybe
think.
I can interview him.
I absolutely. It's a her, by the way, and yes,
yeah.
I'm sure you could. And it's not what you think. Check it out.
Okay. Well, I have a chapter called Speculations on Time and Spirit. That's section 2.48. If anyone is interested, I talk about my views on time travel. That's in terms of I'm not making. They're just speculations. But it kind of explains my philosophy, you might say, about time. Well, so we talked about, dialectic. We talked about, demagoguery and how it's the opposite of philosophy. Demagoguery is about intentionally trying to obscure the truth, to confuse, to do everything that is contrary to the truth. It's because all it cares about is the acquisition of power. So I started off that way, and then from that, we talked about how that's opposite what I call the fortress philosophy of the truth, of how to obtain the truth, and how to live an ethical life, and how to be as positively human to the best aspects of our being, which has to do with learning, truth, peace, love, joy. I think knowledge. That's what life is about. Power is not, for its own sake, is pretty bad. Power, when employed in behalf, if power is the servant of love, then it can be used to good purposes. So, along those lines, one of the reasons I'm very interested in reincarnation is because that is basically reincarnation is basically, when you think about it, a philosophy of learning. Is that, we're here on this earth, and we live and we learn and we die and we come back and we keep on learning to try to perfect ourselves as long as throughout time. And so that's really the beautiful thing about reincarnation. Whether it's true or not, well, I hope it is true, because it's a wonderful, to me, it's complementary with my philosophy of life, which is learning. And so reincarnation, as opposed to sort of a static view of heaven, is really this progressive learning. It's also, I believe, reincarnation only makes sense if there's free will, because it takes free will to correct, to understand that which could not possibly be determined, because the truth sometimes has to be discovered. And I think the universe itself has to discover the truth. I think God, whatever God is, has to discover the truth. Is still learning. I talked about that on last week's show. Now, section 2.49 of my book is called Pascal's Wager. Now, this follows the other section on time travel, because it has to do with the future, and it has to do with living your life as best you can, and what that means. And so it kind of all blends together. So I'm just going to read just very short chapters, only 1, 2, 3 and a quarter pages, and then we're going to close out. It's called Pascal's Wager. In his incomplete and posthumously published Pensies, Blaise Pascal suggested that since knowledge concerning the truth or falsity of God's existence is impossible to ascertain with any certainty, a belief in God's existence is nevertheless justified in the form of a wager. In modern terms, the wager might be described as a risk-benefit analysis. So this is what Pascal said. This is Pascal's wager. Let us weigh the gain and the loss in wagering that God is. Let us estimate these two chances. If you gain all. If you lose nothing. Wager, then, without hesitation. He is. In other words, you have nothing to lose by wagering in God's favor, because that's a guarantee that you go to heaven, and if God doesn't exist, there's no lost gain. But if he does exist, and if you believe in heaven and hell, then you're better off waging for his existence. So I was just describing it. Now I'm going to continue with the reading. Pascal was attempting to reconcile his deeply rational mind with his equally deep spiritual and religious faith. Contrary to the rigidity of inflexible mentality, the rigidly inflexible mentality of freethinkers, this is a highly rational approach, because, as Pascal argues, it is unwise to arbitrarily dismiss that which we cannot disprove. We cannot prove or disprove beliefs that are grounded on non-empirical or non-scientific methods such as revelation or mystical insight. However, Pascal fails to build a sustainable or meaningful bridge between faith and reason. Pascal's problem concerns the nature of what it is that he is wagering on. The question, what is God, must first be answered because until an answer is provided, the wagerer doesn't know on what he places the wager. Pascal defines God theistically in terms of the familiar supreme being of the Bible. But clearly, the existence of God is not an either-or proposition because beliefs in God vary widely. For example, official Catholic doctrine in Pascal's time, as in the present, rejects belief in reincarnation. Therefore, would a wager that both God and reincarnation are existent realities rob the wagerer from his hope or gain for gain? Let's consider the far more radical case in which a particular person's conception of God has been influenced by a satanic upbringing, which taught that Satan is the true ruler of the universe and that evil is the only path to salvation. What if the Satanist believes that God is subordinate to Satan and that he seeks to overturn Satan's rule, and therefore believing in God could end with the eternal disfavor of the devil? In this devilish set of circumstances, basing your decision in terms of Pascal's wager, calculated by the odds, would suggest that you should believe in Satan and act in accordance with satanic principles and ritual. By adopting the arbitrary logic of this wager, Pascal would have no choice but to conclude that it would be foolhardy to bet against Satan because, clearly, he would derive maximum benefit by siding with him. Perhaps you say that this argument is absurd, but in retort, I say that by linking eternal bliss to a wager that is made dependent upon a particular definition of that which is admittedly unknowable will guarantee absurd consequences. Okay, so I'm not going to read, as I started reading this, I realized it's too long. I'm wondering, I'm debating with I'll read the last chapter just to get to, because I just want to do it because this is the way I want to close the show. So there's another page and a half, but I'm going to skip. But I want to read the last chapter. But should human knowledge someday transcend the barrier of time, we may each need to contemplate a very different sort of wager than Pascal. So obviously I skipped the part where I talked about time travel in this section, but I'm now describing how it connects with Pascal's wager. I propose here a wager that is not an impossible metaphysical calculation, but rather a calculation of humanity's potential in the virtual infinity of time. While some criminals and morally corrupt individuals may be able to evade justice and prevent the discovery of truth in the present, they may be unable to hide from the future. The premise being set here is less far-fetched than Pascal's. A wager based on linking eternal bliss with a particular belief in a deity requires an arrogance and presumption of faith. On the other hand, wagering on the eventuality of some sort of time travel based on humanity's technological and intellectual development is a vastly more likely bet than Pascal's wager because A, it would be based on a projection of human development that does not entail knowing the mind of God, and B, the wager need not state how time travel will be achieved, but only that it will be realized if only in the distant future. Distant could be 100 years, 1,000 years, many thousands or tens of thousands of years or more. But I submit that my wager on the future eventuality of time travel and its ramifications for justice is a wager worth making. Wager then, without hesitation, the prospect of time travel and potential intercessions from the future may give wrongdoers something other than an eternal barring from the heavenly abode to think about. Death may be an all too shallow place to hide. Are you willing to wager against humanity's future and its terrestrial court. That's the end of the chapter. Okay, unless you didn't follow it, all I'm saying is if you're going to have a wager like Pascal's, you're better off wagering on the future and the possibility that if in the distant future a terrestrial court can go back in time and find you, that may be actually a worse fate than hell. Anyway, that concludes that particular chapter. And on that wonderful note, I think we will conclude tonight's broadcast. But before I do, I just want to thank everyone for listening once again. And I will repeat something that I said on a recent broadcast, which I heard Hillary Clinton herself say, which is, remember, friends, don't let friends vote Trump. Okay, so this concludes tonight's broadcast. For links to my book, Ethical Empowerment, my philosophical counseling and hypnotherapy practice, and the Social Philosophizers Club, please visit arthurdschwartz.com. And this is Arthur D. Schwartz reminding you to live well and think deeply. So until next time, good night, everybody.